Have you ever felt invisible, like no one notices your presence even when you give it your all? Have you ever had that feeling of passing places, people, and it seems like they simply don't exist? Now imagine experiencing this every day, inside one of the most famous stages in world sport, surrounded by cameras, stars, applause, and yet being completely ignored. This is the reality of thousands of ordinary people who make the world go round behind the scenes. People like me, like you, or like Carl, a simple man, with no name, no spotlight, but without knowing it, he was about to experience the most exciting moment of his life, a moment that didn't happen in a final, nor in an epic play, but in silence, away from the cameras, with a gesture as powerful as any championship title. Today you will discover a real, moving and transformative story, a story that reveals the most human and greatest side of Michael Jordan, the one that rarely appears in the media, and I guarantee you this attitude will change the way you see not only the greatest basketball player of all time, but also those people that you perhaps never noticed around you. Don't jump. Don't advance. This story needs to be heard until the end. And before you start, leave it here in the comments. Have you ever seen someone ignored even though they dedicate themselves every day? Or have you felt this way too? Your story can touch other people, because sometimes all someone needs is to be seen. Carl wasn't a player, he wasn't a technician, he didn't have a uniform with a number or his name printed in newspapers, he didn't appear in the post-game interviews, much less take part in the victory photos, but without him, none of that would happen. Nothing. 13 years ago, Carl worked as a cleaner at the gym where the Chicago Bulls made history. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave, the type of person who walks around with their eyes down, paying attention to what no one sees, the glass. Forgotten on the floor, the sweat stain left on the bench, the towel thrown in the corner. For many, irrelevant details. For Carl, part of his duty. He didn't do it for recognition, he did it for honor. The routine was always the same. While the players were applauded, Carl cleaned up in silence. While reporters wrote headlines, he picked up trash. And yet, it never failed. Not on flu days, not on nights when I came home with a sore back. He was never late. He never failed to fulfill his mission, because he believed that everyone has a role, and his edge was to keep everything running behind the scenes. Few knew his name. Even fewer remembered to look him in the eye. But Carl never complained. He was discreet, polite, solitary. I liked listening to the radio while I worked, and even amid the chaos of a crowded game, he always remained firmly in his corner, like a silent cog in a grand spectacle. But what Carl didn't imagine was that someone, in silence, was watching him too, and that someone was simply Michael Jordan. That night, after another electrifying victory, something different was about to happen, and for the first time in over a decade, Carl would no longer be invisible. What started as an ordinary night at work would become the most unforgettable day of his life. That night the game was intense. The gym pulsed with every dribble, every shot, every point. Michael Jordan, as always, was brilliant. Another victory, another memorable performance. The applause echoed. The cameras captured his every expression, but something caught the attention of those who were more attentive. Jordan didn't seem to celebrate as usual. His gaze was distant. He walked slowly, as if looking for something, or someone. While reporters waited for him in the locker room, he took his time. He walked along the sides of the gym, past backstage. That's when, in an almost invisible corner, he saw Carl, crouched down, cleaning up a trail of drink spilled by a fan. Nobody paid attention, but Jordan stopped. He watched for a few seconds in silence, a small gesture but full of meaning. Carl concentrated, didn't even notice. He was so used to not being noticed that he followed his routine automatically. It was only when he stood up and turned his face that he saw Jordan there, the biggest name in the history of basketball, standing still, looking directly at him. There was a brief moment of embarrassment. Carl hesitated, made to leave, to give space. But before he could say anything, Jordan spoke. "You've been working here for a long time, right?" Carl was unresponsive for a second. Then he replied shyly, "Yes, sir. 13 years ago." Jordan just nodded. The silence that followed was stronger than any conversation. There was no need for words. That look, that pause, it was as if, for the first time, Carl was truly being seen by someone. Jordan took another step closer. He placed his hand on Carl's shoulder and said sincerely, Thank you for everything you do. Carl stood still, almost in disbelief at what he had just heard. It wasn't just a sentence, it was recognition. It was respect. It was humanity. And what would come after that would change everything. The gym was still buzzing with the remnants of victory, but for Carl, time seemed to have stopped. Michael Jordan, the legend, the idol, the man who had once conquered the world, stood before him. And more than that, I was interested. It wasn't just a formal speech, as so many do out of politeness. Jordan wanted to hear, I wanted to know. The two continued walking together backstage. No cameras, no audience, just the two of them. Jordan asked about Carl's life, where he lived. If I had children, what was your routine like? And with each answer, something inside Jordan seemed to transform. Carl said he took 2 buses a day, lived far away but was never late, that he had 2 children and that his wife was at home, sick, awaiting test results. He said that sometimes he didn't eat lunch properly to save money. But he never missed work because that was all he had. Jordan listened in silence, and as he listened, something in his face changed. It wasn't pity, it was admiration. It was respect. It was that kind of silent recognition that comes when you understand the greatness of someone who fights without an audience. Carl, in turn, was still trying to understand what was happening. He was disconcerted, but there was a new sparkle in his eyes. For the first time in years, someone cared. Someone asked, listened, validated their existence. And then Jordan asked a question that took Carl completely by surprise. Has anyone here ever thanked you for everything you do? Carl lowered his eyes. He took a deep breath, and he replied with a slight smile of someone carrying years of invisibility, I don't think so. Jordan remained silent for a few seconds. Then he said firmly, so it's time to change that. At that moment, Carl didn't know what that meant. But the action Jordan would take next would not only change his life, but leave the entire gym in tears. Jordan left the conversation with Carl silently, but in his mind, everything was already decided. That couldn't go unnoticed. Carl couldn't be invisible again after that night. He needed to be seen. It needed to be celebrated. Because deep down, Jordan knew a true team wasn't just made by those who scored points, but also by those who kept everything going while no one watched. It was then that, despite being tired and sweaty, Jordan returned to the locker room with a clear purpose. He called the team director and got straight to the point. We need to recognize Carl. Today. The director frowned in surprise. He responded with that bureaucratic and evasive tone that so often serves to postpone important decisions. Michael, he's from the outsourced team. We don't have the structure for that right now. But Jordan was firm. He crossed his arms. He looked into the director's eyes with the same intensity with which he looked at his opponents in the NBA Finals. So create it. Find a way. If we can organize a press conference for any player injury, we can bring people together to appreciate those who have been here for more than a decade. The atmosphere, until then relaxed due to the victory, began to change. Some players heard the conversation and approached. Nobody really understood what was happening, but they felt that something important was coming. Jordan asked them to call everyone who was still in the gym, coaching staff, players, staff, security. I wanted everyone there. Meanwhile, he himself went to the locker room, took one of his signed pairs of sneakers and wrote something special. Then, he prepared an envelope with a generous bonus taken from his own pocket. Carl, in turn, was still at the back of the gym, finishing cleaning the bleachers. For him, this would be just another night at work, like all the others. But little did I know that at that moment, a stage was being set. Not with lights, not with trophies, but with respect, empathy, and justice. Carl was called by one of the team's assistants. At first, he thought he had done something wrong. His heart sped up. After all, behind the scenes, when they call you a surprise, it's rarely for a good thing. But the tone of the call was different, respectful, almost solemn. He was led down the inner corridor, still with his dirty uniform and gloves on his hands. Upon exiting the tunnel that connected backstage to the main court, Carl stopped. The gym, now almost empty of fans, still had dozens of people gathered in the center of the court. Players, coaching staff, security guards, and, in the middle of them all, Michael Jordan. Carl hesitated. He looked around. He tried to retreat, but someone put their hand on his shoulder and said, "It's up to you. You can go." Carl's every step to center court felt like it weighed a ton. He walked slowly, not really understanding what was happening. No one had ever asked him to step foot there as a protagonist. Never. It didn't make sense until Jordan got on the mic. Silence took over. The initial few applauses were replaced by an almost sacred attention. Everyone knew that if Jordan had the microphone, it was because something important was going to be said. And then he began. Today is not about me, not about the game. Today is about a man who has been with us for over a decade. A man who never asked for anything but gave everything. A man who kept this gym operating with dignity, even without being seen by anyone. Carl, standing next to Jordan, looked down. The lump in his throat tightened. The hands were shaking. This here is Carl. And today he won't leave here like he came in. Today he will be remembered. He will be respected. Because without him, none of this would exist. The gym collapsed in applause. Long, deep, standing. Carl looked around as if he was still trying to understand if this was real. But it was. At that moment, for the first time in 13 years, he was at the center. He was applauded. He was the protagonist. Still emotional, Michael Jordan reached out and handed Carl an envelope. People applauded, but there was a symbolic silence in the air. One of those moments when time seems to slow down and everyone wants to commit every second to memory. Carl held the envelope with shaking hands. When he opened it, his eyes found a sum of money he had never held at once. A bonus, equivalent to 6 months of your salary. A value that for him meant food on the table, medicine for his wife, dignity for his family. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about being remembered, about someone saying, with actions, "You matter." Before Carl could react, Jordan took a pair of sneakers out of his bag. It wasn't just any pair. They were exclusive sneakers from their line, personalized, and with a handwritten dedication. To Carl, the true behind-the-scenes MVP, with "Gratitude, MJ." As he read, Carl put his hands over his face. The tears came like a flood. There was no longer any way to contain it. The man who for years silently cleaned the ground where stars walked was now celebrated by one of those stars, not as an employee but as an equal, as a human being with value, with history, with soul. Jordan then came over and hugged him. A long hug, strong, silent, a gesture that said more than any speech. Around, many were also crying, excited players, employees in silence. That scene crossed the barriers of sport, status, fame. It was about humanity, about recognizing who carries the world without being noticed. Carl tried to say something. The voice didn't come out, but his eyes said it all. It was gratitude, surprise, relief. It was the feeling of finally being seen. And as the gym gave a standing ovation, Jordan passed the ball, not literally, but symbolically, to an ordinary man who, for one night, became unforgettable. After that gesture, the atmosphere in the gym was never the same. In the following weeks, a silent transformation took place behind the scenes. What used to be rush and indifference has become a more human, more attentive, more conscious environment. People began to see each other with new eyes. Maintenance personnel began to be greeted by name. The smiles stopped being formal and became spontaneous. The security guard at the main door, previously ignored, now received pats on the shoulder and sincere thanks. Even the coffee girl, used to serving without being noticed, began to receive compliments for the details she always did with care, but that no one noticed. And Carl became a symbol, not out of vanity, but because now he carried something that no one could take away: recognition. It didn't take long for him to become a topic among the players. Some would walk by him and say, "You're the man, Carl." Others asked about his family, his children. There were even those who asked for advice. That invisible man who walked with his shoulders slumped now walked with his chest open, not out of pride, but out of belonging. Jordan, in turn, did not speak further on the subject. He didn't make a spectacle of it. He didn't post on social media. He didn't give an interview. For him, the gesture was simple, natural. It was the right thing to do. And perhaps it was exactly this simplicity that made everything even more impactful. Because true respect doesn't make a fuss. It changes the environment. It transforms relationships. It awakens consciousness. That was the biggest play of that season. It didn't happen on the court. It wasn't worth points. But everything changed. Because deep down, the greatest champions are not the ones who score the most baskets. They are those who can see the value of those who live in the shadows. The story of Carl and Michael Jordan is not just a beautiful behind-the-scenes memory of the sport. She is a living, urgent, necessary reminder. A reminder that the most important people in our lives are often not in the spotlight. They are behind the scenes, in silence, supporting everything. How many times have you passed someone without looking? How many times have you thanked those who serve your coffee, clean your office, take care of security where you work? The greatness of a human being is not measured by the position he holds, the salary he receives, or the name he bears. She reveals herself in the respect she offers, and in the way she treats others. Jordan could have ignored Carl like everyone else. He could have continued his routine, won more awards, broken more records, without ever stopping to notice that man bent by life. But he chose otherwise. He chose to stop, to hear, see, and act. This attitude did not make him more famous. It didn't bring him sponsorship, but he revealed who he really is when no one is watching. And that's what makes this story so powerful. Carl was not honored for doing something extraordinary. He was honored for doing the ordinary with dignity. And that's where the big lesson lies. You don't have to be a star to be important. You just need to be human and treat others like humans too. Maybe, in your everyday life, there is someone like Carl, someone you never noticed but who is there standing firm, silently making a difference. Maybe today is the day to change that, to say a sincere good morning, to be grateful, to recognize, because one word can change a day, one gesture can change a life, and one look can transform everything. Jordan's greatest play wasn't on the court. It was in the heart of who he decided to see. The story you just saw isn't just about Carl, it's about all of us. Because all of us, at some point, have felt invisible. We've all come across someone who carries the world on their shoulders and yet moves forward without complaining. And we all have the chance every day to do as Jordan did. Stop, look, and recognize. You don't need to have millions in your account or be a legendary athlete to make a difference in someone's life. Sometimes all someone else needs is to be seen, respected, valued. And if this story really touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share with someone who deserves to be remembered, someone who, like Carl, remains silent but deserves to be applauded. And now, before you leave, I need to tell you something. If you thought what Michael Jordan did for Carl was moving, just wait until you see what happened when someone from his own family was humiliated. A completely unexpected, unfair, revolting situation, and one that showed once again Jordan's strength, character, and heart off the court. Click on the video that is now appearing on your screen and find out what Michael did when his own mother was disrespected by a driver. This story will move you in ways you don't expect. And comment below, have you ever seen someone treated with indifference but deserving of applause? Or have you already experienced this yourself? Tell me, because your story deserves to be heard too. See you in the next video. And never forget, the biggest plays in life don't happen on the court. They happen when we decide to see each other.